Dr. Grogan, how the bill will work?
To understand how the bill works, or what's soon to be the law works, we have to understand the underlying asylum system that we now have. This is a brand new asylum system as of July 2023, which very simply says, if a person who wants to claim asylum, that means wants to say they are a refugee, if they come to the UK via an irregular or also called illegal route, this is typically a small boat from France, then they cannot gain status in the UK. They cannot become a refugee in the UK. They cannot claim asylum in the UK. Instead, they must be removed to a third country. So that's the underlying law that we have as of July 2023. The problem for the government was that only one country in the world was going to accept asylum seekers, to allow them into their country, to process them, to ask, are they a refugee? Are they not a refugee? And if they're not a refugee, to send them back to the country that they came from. And if they are a refugee, to stay in that country. And the only country in the world that would allow that right now is Rwanda. In November, December last year, the UK Supreme Court said this policy of taking people who arrived unlawfully or illegally in the UK and removing them to Rwanda is unlawful, not because the policy of sending someone to a third country is unlawful, it's not, but instead because Rwanda is not a safe country. They listened to the evidence of experts, especially from the United Nations that has been working with refugees in Rwanda for a few decades, and said, right now in Rwanda, it's not a safe country. So the law that we saw passed quite dramatically in the very late hours last night said that Rwanda is and must always be considered a safe country. So how this will work in practice is that if someone arrives by a small boat and they get an order or a deportation order that they will be removed to Rwanda, then the decision maker, so the immigration officer, the courts, anyone who might be looking at this person's claim, can only consider Rwanda a safe country. It does not matter any evidence to the contrary. They cannot consider it. They must send that person to Rwanda as a matter of law.
Okay, Joelle, I'm going to come back to you, but let's go to Rwanda because our correspondent Barbara Plett-Usher is there for us. And we've had several people actually asking that question, which Joelle has dealt with. Is Rwanda a safe country, Barbara?
Well, I would say that depends on who you're asking and what exactly you mean. So it is safe in terms of crime. The statistics show that it actually has a very high safe index. It's high on the indices of crime, safety for crime, and that is something that the government often talks about, that we are the safest country in the world. When it comes to crime, I think that that is not so far from the truth. As you heard, the Supreme Court in Britain had some concerns about safety for refugees, and the thing that it was most concerned about was the risk that the asylum seekers could be deported back to the countries from which they had fled, especially if their applications for asylum in Rwanda were rejected. So that is something that the Rwanda and the UK have worked on through this treaty that they signed in December, which basically says that's not going to happen. If your asylum application is rejected, you can still stay in the country. There are residence permits, there are sort of arrangements for you. That is something that the Rwandans are now working through in terms of law. They have to make changes to their migrants and refugees law in order to accommodate that. The Supreme Court also mentioned an incident in 2018 when refugees who'd come from the Democratic Republic of Congo in Rwanda they demonstrated because the UN was cutting their rations, and the Rwandan police they opened fire and killed 12 of them. So the government here says, well, that was an isolated incident, it hasn't happened again. Human Rights Watch has said perhaps what's more germane to the debate is that there don't seem to have been any more demonstrations since then, and some of the people who were involved were arrested and jailed. I did ask a Rwandan official whether, when the refugees came, would they be able to demonstrate or criticize the government, and she said they could do so based on Rwandan law and also on refugee regulations. It has to be said that there has been a lot of criticism allegations that dissent is repressed in Rwanda. That comes from political activists, that comes from human rights organizations. And even when we were asking people about what they thought about the UK deal, they didn't really want to speak their mind if they were going to criticize the deal unless they could be anonymous. So that sort of fear factor is there. Again, it's something that Kigali denies, but I would say that the UK has at least acknowledged it. It said that there is some restrictions on freedom of expression, freedom of assembly, but it is unlikely that people who relocate here will be badly treated. And so that is the calculation on which they are basing their decision.
Simon, if I could come to you. Thank you for bearing with us with all the questions. Simon, if I can come to you for our next question. And that question is, how many people will be sent to Rwanda?
Well, if you ask the British government, the official line is this scheme is uncapped. And when the then Prime Minister, Boris Johnson, came here to Kent over 2 years ago to announce the plan to send some asylum seekers to Rwanda, he was speaking of potentially tens of thousands of people going there each year. Now, this morning, the government said initially when those flights depart, if they take off in around 10 to 12 weeks' time, as the government hopes, the numbers could be small to begin with as people get used to this scheme. So we may be talking a few hundred. Some people are saying maybe around 300 people initially in the first few weeks of that. But the government says that it wants to see flights going regularly, a steady rhythm of flights, as it puts it, throughout the course of the summer. So they certainly seem to be implying that numbers could be ratcheted up. There are some real challenges, though. Firstly, the fact that you've got to find airlines prepared to get involved in this. The government says it has got someone in mind. It says it's also got an airfield. You've also got to take into account the capacity that Rwanda itself has, because it won't be able to take tens of thousands of people all in one go. And that's why the government has also been exploring similar deals with other countries. We've had countries like Armenia and the Côte d'Ivoire also mentioned as possible destinations. I think they will want to see how it works with Rwanda initially. But also another really big challenge in this is so far around 50,000 people are being told that they could potentially be eligible to go to Rwanda because they have arrived in the UK illegally since the law was changed. Those people are being told they won't be allowed to claim asylum here, and the government's intention is to remove them, so Rwanda being the obvious choice. But that backlog, 50,000 people, that's going to take quite a lot of time to shift. And all the time, you've got more people arriving by small boat. As I speak to you at the moment, currently the lifeboat has come back into shore, bringing back a group of migrants. There are also 3 border force boats we've seen today bringing people here to Dover. So as the backlog continues to grow, it's even more of a challenge for the government to get some people out of the UK and thousands of kilometres from here to East Africa.
Yeah, you're right, Simon. We're just showing those pictures of the RNLI. They were offloading passengers, people that presumably had been picked up in the Channel this morning. What more can you tell us about what happened there?
Well, it's been another really busy day in the Channel. Conditions out there are really calm. You can see France very closely in the distance, and that means that there have been a large number of boats launching from the beaches of northern France. What happens is once a boat makes it halfway across the Channel, the people on board become the responsibility of the UK authorities. So we see the border force and the lifeboat go out and pick up these people, make sure they're safe and bring them back to Dover. But we've also heard today of a tragedy in the Channel. There was a boat that set off from a beach in a place called Wimereux, which is along the coast from Calais heading towards Boulogne. That had 112 people on board. Now, I think that would be an unprecedented number. I've never heard of so many people on board one single boat. We talk about small boats, but these boats have been getting much, much bigger. So 112 people on board. That boat got stranded on a sandbank. Then as people were attempting to relaunch it, there was really a scramble to get on board that boat. People ended up in the water, and 3 men, one woman and a young child lost their lives. But incredibly, you see the desire of people to get to the UK, because although the authorities were quickly on scene and rescued half of those 112 people, half of them, though, didn't want to be rescued and decided they got their boat working again, the motor was working, and they continued their journey to the UK. So it gives you a sense of just how dangerous this is, but just how strong the desire is to get